The great hall of the Coalition station shook as alarm bells rang through every corridor. The representatives from thousands of worlds had gathered in this chamber for over 10,000 years, and they had never seen such chaos. The Krell had returned. Chancellor Vex stood at the head of the long council table. His species was known for their calm and rational thinking, but even he could not hide the fear in his eyes. News had arrived just hours ago from the outer territories. A fleet of Coalition ships had gone silent. One by one, they stopped sending signals, and then the horror began. The recordings showed massive black ships tearing through space with impossible speed and power. These were the Krell, the species that everyone believed was destroyed millennia ago. Around the table sat representatives from 100 different civilizations. The crystalline beings from Zix Prime trembled as they received casualty reports. The aquatic species from the water worlds looked at each other with worry in their eyes. Even the strong and proud warriors from Crone 4 seemed shaken by the news. General Cross from the military command stood and slammed his fist on the table, his gray skin rippling with the motion. They are using technology we have not seen before. He said his voice was deep and carried the weight of experience. He had fought in 3 major wars, but never against anything like this. The Krell are moving toward the inner systems. If they reach Coalition space, we will lose thousands of worlds. An old scholar named Keeper Thole entered the chamber carrying a stack of ancient data crystals. The other representatives turned to look at him. Thole was from the Vex Thar species known for studying history and keeping records of the past. He looked troubled, very troubled. "I have been searching our oldest archives," he said in a quiet voice that somehow filled the entire chamber. "I found something that the Council should know about. It is an old prophecy written in the language of the first Coalition members of your civilizations. I was part of an ancient alliance that kept this prophecy hidden because we did not believe it was real." Chancellor Vex leaned forward. "What prophecy are you speaking of?" Keeper Thole took a deep breath and began to read from one of the crystals. "In the time of great darkness, when the weapons of old rise from their sleep, a power will awaken in the forgotten lands. The apex predators of the cradle will return from their exile, and they will bring with them fury and strength that the galaxy has not seen since. The age of breaking. The ancient enemies will tremble before them, and the fallen worlds will rise again." The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant, but no one wanted to say it out loud. The prophecy was speaking of a species that had been lost to history. The apex predators. The prophecy called them. Where did this prophecy come from? Asked a young representative from one of the newer member worlds. This must be mythology or perhaps the imagination of ancient peoples. No, said Keeper Thole. He shook his head slowly. I have spent 300 years studying these records. I have cross-referenced them with accounts from countless civilizations, and I have found proof. This prophecy was written by survivors of a war that happened nearly 10,000 years ago. A war between the Krell and another species, a species that was so powerful that they nearly destroyed the Krell completely. The Krell fled and hid in the dark regions of space for thousands of years. We thought they were dead. General Cross leaned back in his chair. So you are saying there is another species, more powerful than the Krell, and they are in exile somewhere. There is a legend, said Keeper Thole, a world called Earth. It was the home of the apex predators. According to the records, this species called themselves humans. They were warriors and builders, and they were fierce beyond measure. They destroyed themselves. Though some records say it was through their own conflict, others say it was through disease and natural disaster. Whatever happened to them, the world became silent, and we heard nothing from them for ages. Chancellor Vex stood and walked to the viewing window. He looked out at the stars and the darkness. And beyond, we cannot rely on mythology and legends, he said, Turning back to face the chamber, we need to act now. We need to gather every ship we have and prepare our defenses. The Krell have declared war and we must respond with force. But what about the prophecy? Asked a small, delicate being from one of the far colonies. What if the prophecy is real? What if these humans still exist in some distant part of space? That is impossible, said General Cross. If they had survived, they would have made contact with us. We have explored most of the galaxy. Over time, we would have found them. The chamber erupted in argument and debate. Some wanted to search for these legendary humans. Others wanted to focus all their energy on fighting the Krell. Immediately, Chancellor Vex tried to restore order, but it seemed like every species had a different opinion about what should be done. Then Keeper Thal spoke again in a loud voice that quieted everyone. Around 10,000 years ago, we mapped a region of space that we called the Forgotten Cradle. We discovered primitive civilizations there, but nothing remarkable. We decided not to return to that region. The coordinates were recorded but then lost in various archives. I found them again today while searching the old prophecy records. "Where is this Forgotten Cradle?" asked Chancellor Vex urgently. "It is in a region far beyond the outer territories," said Keeper Thal. "A region we have not visited in thousands of years. We would need a fast ship and a brave crew to make the journey, and we would need to go now, before the Krell spread too far into Coalition space." General Cross nodded slowly. "It is a desperate move, but we are desperate. The Krell are winning. If there is, and even a small chance that the prophecy is real, if there is even a possibility that this species of humans still exists and might help us, we must try it." Chancellor Vex looked at the assembled representatives around the table. The decision was difficult, but everyone understood the truth. They were losing the war against the Krell. They needed help from somewhere, and if ancient myths and legends were their only hope, then they would have to follow that hope to the edge of the galaxy. "Send the fastest scout ship we have to the Forgotten Cradle," said Chancellor Vex. "Pick the best crew available. Tell them they are looking for a signal from a lost species. Tell them they are looking for humans. Tell them they are looking for the apex predators of ancient legend." As the representatives dispersed to begin their emergency operations, Keeper Thal stood alone. And at the window, he looked at the ancient data crystal in his hand. The prophecy had been hidden for so long that most had forgotten it was even real. But now, as the Krell spread their war across Coalition space, the old legends seemed less like fantasy and more like warning, or perhaps like hope. The year was 2247 on the human calendar, and Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the command center of Earth Station Prime, watching the stars through the massive transparent dome. The solar system was finally at peace after centuries of struggle and conflict. Humanity had rebuilt itself from the ashes of its own destruction, and now they looked outward to the stars with wonder and curiosity. The deep space listening posts had been monitoring radio signals from beyond the outer planets for over 200 years. They were designed to detect any intelligent signals that might come from distant stars. The equipment was old, but it still worked. The scientists who maintained them believed that humanity was alone in the galaxy, that they might be the only intelligent species in this corner of space. Then the signal came. It started as a faint beeping sound on the sensors. Dr. Chen was reviewing data when one of her technicians called out urgently. "A signal," she said, pointing at the screen, "coming from deep space beyond anything we have detected before." Dr. Chen rushed to the screen, and her eyes widened. The signal was not natural. It was clearly artificial, and it was carrying information encoded in a pattern that suggested intelligence. Someone or something was sending a message to anyone who would listen. She immediately contacted the global government of Earth. The message was simple, and clear: an alien species was asking for help. The reaction on Earth was divided. Some people celebrated. The news that humanity was not alone spread quickly through every city and colony on Earth, and the lunar settlements. People gathered in public squares and discussed what this meant for their future. Others were terrified. Fear of the unknown is a powerful thing, and many people believed that this signal could be a threat. The Earth Military Council was called into emergency session. Admiral James Marcus was the commander of the human space forces and one of the most respected military leaders in human history. He listened to the reports and studied the signal carefully. "This appears to be genuine," he said to the other council members. "The signal is weak and degrading, which suggests the sender is in trouble or under attack. The message they sent matches no known human language, but the structure suggests high intelligence." Some council members wanted to hide and ignore the signal. Others wanted to reach out and help. Admiral Marcus stood up and looked each council member in the eye with a steady gaze. "For thousands of years, humanity has struggled to survive," he said in a strong voice. "We have fought wars. We have nearly destroyed ourselves. We have suffered loss and pain beyond measure. But we have also learned something important. We have learned that when someone needs help, we have the responsibility to answer that call. Whether this alien species is friend or foe, we need to respond. We need to show the universe that humanity is more than just survivors. We are builders and defenders and rescuers of the lost." The council voted and the decision was made. A rescue mission would be sent to find the source of the signal. Within 48 hours, the fastest human warships were leaving Earth, orbit heading toward the outer regions of known space. Admiral Marcus commanded the fleet personally. The ships were named after ancient human explorers and warriors: the Columbus, the Gagarin, the Magellan, and the Artemis. They were fast and powerful, and they carried the hopes of an entire species with them. The journey took 3 days at maximum speed. As they crossed through the outer regions of space, the signal became clearer and stronger. Then they saw it. A large alien ship was under attack by even larger black vessels. The ship was badly damaged with fires burning on its outer hull and systems failing. The black ships were sleek and dangerous, and they moved with terrible purpose. Admiral Marcus watched the scene and made a split second. A decision. All ships engaged the enemy vessels. Now he commanded the human fleet opened fire with weapons that the coalition had never seen before. Human warships used advanced ballistic systems and directed energy weapons. They used tactics that seemed random, but were actually precise and calculated. The enemy black ships had expected to face conventional military opposition, but instead they faced something unpredictable and aggressive. Within minutes, the black ships began to retreat. They fired back at the human vessels, scoring some hits, but the humans did not stop. They kept attacking with intensity and purpose. The black ships had weapons that were more advanced, but the humans had something else. They had the will to win, and they adapted to every move their enemy made. Finally, the black ships jumped into hyperspace and disappeared, leaving behind only wreckage and burned atmosphere. The human fleet had won the battle. Admiral Marcus ordered his ship to move beside the damaged alien vessel. A team was sent over to conduct rescue operations and first contact. The alien captain was a tall being with crystalline features and eyes that seemed to glow with intelligence. Her name was Keeper Vex, and she was from the Coalition of Worlds. When she first saw a human, she became very still. Her eyes widened and her hand went to her mouth. She stared at the figure in front of her. "Impossible," she whispered in a language that the human translator managed to convert. "Your species, you are the apex predators. You are the ones from the prophecy." Admiral Marcus did not understand what she was talking about, but he knew that something important had just happened. He reached out his hand in a gesture of peace, and the alien captain carefully extended her hand to meet his. "I am Admiral James Marcus of Earth," he said. "I am here to help you." The alien captain took his hand, and her grip was surprisingly warm. She looked at him with a mixture of wonder and fear. "You are human," she said. "It is real. It is all real." The ancient prophecy. It spoke of your return. The human fleet recovered the alien ship and began the journey back to Earth with a new passenger who carried news that would change the future of humanity forever. As the ships traveled through space, Admiral Marcus and Keeper Vex talked for hours. The alien captain told him about the coalition, about the Krell, and about the ancient prophecy that spoke of humanity as the apex predators of legend. Marcus listened with a mixture of amazement and concern. He understood that this moment was pivotal. So humanity had stepped into a larger universe, and now that universe knew they existed. When the fleet returned to Earth, the global government was waiting. The news spread quickly. A species had survived in secret while Earth rebuilt itself, and now that species was asking for help against an enemy called the Krell, the decision would shape the future of humanity and the galaxy itself. The Coalition headquarters was a massive structure orbiting a neutral star in the center of Coalition space. It had been built over thousands of years and represented the combined effort of hundreds of alien civilizations. It was a place of peace and diplomacy where conflicts were resolved through discussion and reason. Now it was also a place of tension and fear as humanity arrived for the first time. Admiral Marcus stood beside Keeper Vex as they walked through the great corridors of the station. Around them, thousands of aliens from countless species moved through the halls. Some stared at the humans with curiosity, others looked away in fear or distrust. The whispers began immediately. The prophecy is real. The ancient texts were true. The apex predators have returned. The council chamber was even larger than the one on Earth. It was a massive oval room with viewing platforms that rose to a great height. The representatives from the coalition were already assembled, waiting to meet humanity. Admiral Marcus wore the formal uniform of the Earth military forces. His officers stood beside him in their dress uniforms. The meeting began with formality and ritual that the humans found strange. The different species greeted each other in their own languages and then turned to look at the humans. "Welcome," stated Chancellor Vex, the leader of the coalition. "We are honored to meet the species we thought was lost to history. You are the ones the prophecy spoke of." Admiral Marcus nodded. "Thank you for welcoming us. We are honored to be here, and we have come because Keeper Vex tells us that you are in grave danger." "Yes," said General Cross, stepping forward. "The Krell invasion has cost us millions of lives already. Our fleets are being pushed back. Our worlds are falling. We have not faced a threat like this in recorded history. The humans are known to be fierce warriors," said a smaller, delicate representative with doubt in his voice. "But are they ready for total war? Are they prepared for the cost?" "I can answer," that said Admiral Marcus calmly. "Humanity has survived wars that tested every part of our society. We have fought conflicts where millions died. We have. It rebuilt from near-total destruction. We understand sacrifice. We understand the price of survival." Not all coalition members seemed convinced. Some species looked at the humans with suspicion. Some remembered ancient conflicts from 10,000 years ago when humans were still a great power. There was old fear in the council chamber. "We propose a joining of forces," said Admiral Marcus to the assembled council. "Our military will work with your military to develop strategy and tactics to defeat the Krell. We will share knowledge and technology. But we need respect. We need equal standing in this coalition." "That is a bold request," said one of the older representatives. "A species we know nothing about demands equal standing. We demand it because we have earned it," replied Admiral Marcus. He gestured to the data displays that showed the battleware human. "A ships had defeated the Krell vessels. These were your enemies. We faced them, and we won." The council fell silent. This was true, but it created problems. Many species had pride and history. They did not like the idea that a supposedly extinct species could arrive and immediately prove themselves superior in combat. The vote was taken, and after much debate, the humans were granted equal standing in the coalition. They were given a seat on the council, and their military was formally recognized as part of the combined defense force. Training began immediately. The human officers and their coalition counterparts worked together to develop new strategies. The humans introduced concepts that the coalition had never considered before. They spoke of asymmetric warfare. They explained how smaller forces could defeat larger forces through superior tactics and psychology. They taught about the use of terrain and how to turn the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. Some coalition soldiers responded well to these new ideas. Others found the human approach too aggressive, too willing to accept losses if it meant winning the larger battle. A coalition captain named Zor from the warrior species of crone trained with human commanders and began to understand the thinking. "You accept death differently," he said to Colonel Sarah Kane, a human military instructor. "Why do humans charge into danger when retreat is possible? Because sometimes charging wins the day," replied Colonel Kane. "Because the cost of retreat is worse, we have learned that victory belongs to those who accept the price willingly, but that does not mean we are reckless. We calculate the cost and we decide it is worth paying." Zor thought about this, and he had never heard a coalition officer speak this way. The coalition valued preservation and safety, but humans valued victory and purpose in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. Meanwhile, there were problems. Some coalition members began to protest human involvement in military strategy. One species, called the Peaceful Ones, believed that diplomacy could still work with the Krell. They wanted to send messages asking the Krell to discuss peace. Admiral Marcus was called to the council to address this concern. "Diplomacy is important," he said, "but only when both sides want to reach agreement. The Krell are not interested in peace. They want to destroy us and take our territory. This is not a debate where compromise is possible. This is a battle for survival." The Peaceful Ones continued to argue, but most council members agreed with the human assessment. The Krell had already destroyed dozens of coalition worlds. They had killed billions of beings. They showed no interest in negotiation. Then a message came that changed everything. A spy within the coalition had been discovered working for the Krell. The information was shocking. The Krell had known about humanity all along. They had known that the prophecy might be real. They had accelerated their invasion specifically to prevent humans from gaining power in the galaxy. They feared humanity because 10,000 years ago, humanity had nearly destroyed them completely. This revelation silenced all opposition. The coalition members finally understood what was at stake. Not only were their own worlds in danger, but the future of civilization itself depended on defeating the Krell Admiral Marcus, and Chancellor Vex stood together looking at star maps showing the positions of all forces. "Now we fight together truly," said Chancellor Vex. "Now we must defeat the enemy before it is too late. From this moment onward, the fate of the galaxy would rest on the alliance between humanity and the coalition. A species thought long extinct had returned to the stars, and everything would change." The first major battle between the combined human and coalition forces and the Krell fleet happened near the Vex Prime system. It was a system that the coalition desperately wanted to defend because it contained the largest research station in all of coalition space. The station had advanced weapons and defensive systems, but it was also vulnerable to direct assault. Admiral Marcus studied the battle formations with his human officers and the coalition generals. They had detected a massive Krell fleet moving. Toward the system, 300 Krell warships against 200 human and coalition vessels. The odds were difficult, but not impossible. The humans suggested a radical strategy. They would use the asteroid field near Vex Prime as a defensive position. Instead of meeting the Krell in open space, they would fight in the complex terrain where advanced technology would be less effective. The Krell ships were strong, but they were large and inflexible. The human ships were smaller and faster. The coalition generals were hesitant. This tactic meant leaving an entire side of the system undefended. It meant trusting that the asteroid field would provide enough cover. But Admiral Marcus was confident. "Trust me," he said, looking at the gathered officers. "Trust us, we have fought in worse situations. We know how to use the environment as a weapon, the battle." It began with the Krell fleet moving toward the system at high speed. The Krell commanders expected the Coalition ships to try to block them directly, but instead the Coalition fleet seemed to retreat. The human ships led the way, moving into the dense asteroid field with incredible precision. The Krell commanders took this as a sign of weakness and ordered pursuit. That was their first mistake. As the Krell ships entered the asteroid field, the human fleet turned and attacked with ferocity. The human pilots had trained in asteroid environments, and they moved their ships with skills that seemed impossible. The Krell ships were trapped in the field, unable to use their long-range weapons effectively. The battle became close and brutal. Human ships darted between asteroids, firing their weapons with incredible accuracy. The Krell ships tried to adapt, but they had been designed for open space combat. The asteroids damaged their hulls. The close-range fighting negated their weapons advantages. Within 3 hours, the Krell had lost 50 ships and suffered massive damage to many others. The Krell commanders realized their mistake and tried to retreat. But Admiral Marcus had anticipated this. He had positioned his strongest ships to block the exit route. Another 30 Krell vessels were destroyed trying to escape. The Coalition forces suffered losses too. 40 of their ships were destroyed, but they had won. The first major battle was a human and Coalition victory. News of the victory spread through Coalition space like lightning. The morale that had been so low suddenly surged upward. The Krell could be defeated. The prophecy spoke truth. The apex predators had returned and they knew how to fight. But the Krell were not finished. They regrouped and prepared a counterattack. This time they chose a different strategy. They knew that human and Coalition forces were strong in combat, so they decided to use the destructive power of superweapons, deep in Krell space. They had been constructing a devastating weapon, a massive orbital station that could generate a pulse of destructive energy powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. The Krell broadcasted a message across all Coalition channels. "We destroyed you before, and we will do it again." The Krell commander said, his voice echoing across space, "We will use this power to erase the human species from existence, just as we tried 10,000 years ago." The message was a threat, but it was also a confession. The Krell knew about the ancient war. They knew about humanity. They had been waiting for this, a moment for millennia. Chancellor Vex and Admiral Marcus called an emergency meeting of the War Council. "We must destroy that station," said General Cross urgently before they finish it. "But the station is located near a Krell colony world," said one of the Coalition representatives. "If we attack the station, we will have to attack the colony as well. There are billions of Krell civilians living there. The casualties would be enormous. This is the cost of war," said Admiral Marcus in a quiet voice that was somehow more powerful than shouting. "If we do nothing, the Krell will destroy our worlds and kill trillions of our people. If we act now, we can save the galaxy from becoming a Krell-dominated territory. The choice is ours, but it must be made quickly." The council was divided. Some species could not accept the idea of killing billions even to save trillions. They believed there had to be another way. Some understood that Admiral Marcus was right. War sometimes demanded terrible choices. The vote was close. But in the end, desperation and fear won out. The humans would lead an attack on the Krell colony world and the superweapon station. The assault was brutal and swift. The human fleet moved faster than the Krell expected. They destroyed the orbital stations and defenses around the colony world. The Krell tried to defend, but they were overwhelmed. The battle lasted less than 4 hours. When it was over, the Krell superweapon was destroyed. The colony world was in ruins. Billions of Krell had died, but the immediate threat was eliminated. Admiral Marcus stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the destruction with a heavy heart. A coalition officer approached him. "The Krell are completely so vulnerable now," said the officer. "Their morale will be destroyed. We can end this war if we strike at their homeworld now." Admiral Marcus nodded slowly. He understood what had to be done. The final battle was approaching. The Krell homeworld was defended by their strongest forces, but if they could reach it, they could end this war forever. The human and coalition fleets regrouped and moved toward the Krell homeworld. The Krell assembled every ship they had to defend their home. The battle that followed was the largest and most intense of the entire war. Thousands of ships clashed in orbit above the Krell world. The sound of weapons fire and explosions filled the vacuum of space. Human soldiers fought with a dedication that the coalition could still not fully understand. These warriors would rush into danger without hesitation. They would sacrifice themselves to protect their comrades. They seemed to understand something about war that went deeper than tactics or strategy. They understood that some things were worth dying for. After 18 hours of continuous fighting, the Krell defenses collapsed. The coalition flag was raised above the Krell capital city and the war was effectively over. The Krell forces still in the field surrendered or fled. Admiral Marcus walked through the conquered capital city, looking at the damage and thinking about the cost. The humans had lost 3,000 soldiers. The coalition had lost 7,000. The Krell had lost billions. Their entire civilization was shattered. A young soldier approached the admiral. His uniform was torn and his face was covered with dust. "Is it over, sir?" asked the soldier. "Yes," Admiral Marcus replied. "It is over. We won," the soldier. I'd looked out at the ruins and asked quietly, "Was it worth the cost?" Admiral Marcus looked at the young human face and gave an answer that would define humanity for generations to come. "We survived, and we protected those who could not protect themselves. That is always worth the cost, because the alternative is unthinkable." 1 year had passed since the end of the Krell War. The coalition had begun the long process of rebuilding. The worlds that had been destroyed needed to be restored. The billions who had died needed to be remembered. The scars of war would take generations to heal. Humanity had been formally recognized as a full member of the coalition with permanent representation on the council. Chancellor Vex had invited Admiral Marcus to a private meeting in the observation chamber of coalition headquarters. They looked out together at the stars. "I wanted to thank you personally," said Chancellor Vex. "You have saved our civilization. Your people gave everything to protect ours. We will never forget that." Admiral Marcus nodded appreciatively, but his expression was thoughtful. "There is something we need to discuss," he said. "We need to fully decode the ancient prophecies and the historical records. We need to understand what happened 10,000 years ago between humanity and the Krell Chancellor." Vex agreed, and together they opened the sealed archives that had been protected for thousands of years. What they found was shocking. The records showed that humanity had indeed been the greatest power in the galaxy 10,000 years ago. Human civilization had spanned thousands of systems. Their technology was advanced beyond what the current coalition had achieved. Their military was feared. It could cross the galaxy. But then something terrible had happened. According to the records, humanity had torn itself apart. The ancient records spoke of wars between human factions. The weapons they developed were so powerful that entire worlds were destroyed. The conflicts consumed human civilization from within. Billions died in nuclear fires and biological plagues. Humanity had not been conquered by the Krell. The Krell had merely taken advantage of the chaos and destroyed what remained. Admiral Marcus read through the records and his expression grew darker and more troubled. "This is what we were," he said quietly. "This is what we chose to be. This is the violence and darkness that lives in human nature. We destroyed ourselves completely." Chancellor Vex looked at the human commander with sympathy. "But you survived," said the Chancellor. "You rebuilt. I learned from your mistakes. You came back from the edge of destruction, and you became better than you were. Admiral Marcus shook his head. No, we came back from the edge, and we became exactly what we needed to be to survive. We became warriors. We accepted that sacrifice and loss might be necessary. We developed the mindset to do terrible things for the greater good. Look at what we did during the war. We destroyed an entire planet to stop a superweapon. We killed billions. This is the burden of survival, said Chancellor Vex. Every civilization must choose between their ideals and their survival. Humanity chose survival, and that is why you defeated the Krell. The other species could not make that choice. The revelation about humanity's dark past spread through coalition space. The effect was not what everyone expected. Some species became more fearful. Of humanity, they saw humans as dangerous weapons best kept controlled. Others became fascinated by human culture and philosophy. Young beings from many species wanted to learn about humanity, wanted to understand how humans had survived and returned. Embassies were established on 100 worlds. Human merchants began trading with alien civilizations. Human scientists collaborated with coalition researchers on advanced projects. Human artists and musicians introduced new forms of expression that influenced coalition culture. But not everything was peaceful. Some older species resisted human influence. They remembered the ancient stories of human conquest. They feared that history would repeat itself. Some politicians called for limiting human expansion and power. Chancellor Vex and Admiral Marcus worked together to address these concerns at a special gathering of all coalition members. Admiral Marcus gave a speech that would be remembered for centuries. "We were not perfect," he said to the assembled representatives. "We were not kind. We were not merciful. We were fierce and we were dangerous. We conquered worlds, and we fought wars that consumed everything, but we learned. We learned that power alone is not enough. We learned that survival without purpose is hollow. We learned that the strongest warriors are those who choose to protect rather than destroy." He paused and looked at all the different alien species gathered before him. "When you called us, we heard you. We came not because we wanted dominion over this galaxy. We came because we remembered what it meant to stand alone. We came because we understand the cost of survival. We will stand with you, not above you. We will be part of this. A civilization, not masters of it. That is the difference between who we were 10,000 years ago and who we choose to be now." The speech changed the atmosphere. Chancellor Vex called for a vote on full human integration into coalition society. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed with a strong majority. Humanity was accepted as equals in the community of worlds. On Earth, celebrations lasted for weeks. The species that had thought itself alone in the universe had found its family. And more importantly, humanity had found a purpose beyond mere survival. A young human explorer named Maya sat on the bridge of a coalition science vessel looking out at a distant star system. She was part of a joint human and coalition mission to explore unknown regions of space. Behind her worked a crew of beings from a dozen different species. They moved together, and with purpose and unity. An older being who was part of the Vexthar species approached her. For a species that the galaxy forgot existed just 18 months ago. "You have made quite an impression," he said with a tone of respect mixed with wonder. Maya smiled. "I think we are just getting started. We spent so long rebuilding our home. We spent so many years wondering if we were alone. Now we know we have an entire galaxy of friends and partners, and we have so much to explore and learn and build." The Vexthar smiled in his species' unique way. "Yes, I believe that is true." The camera pulled back, showing the human and coalition ship traveling deeper into unknown space. The stars spread out infinitely before them, representing endless possibilities and untold adventures. Humanity had awakened from its long night of isolation. The species that had nearly destroyed itself had instead found redemption in service to others. The apex predators of ancient legend had returned not as conquerors, but as protectors. And as the ship jumped to hyperspace, heading toward new worlds and new destinies, the future seemed bright with possibility. A future where humanity and countless alien species worked together toward common goals, building a civilization stronger and more beautiful than any had ever been. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but not in the way anyone had expected. The ancient texts had spoken of warriors returning from exile to save the galaxy. But what the prophecy had not predicted was that these warriors would also be teachers and builders and friends. They would not conquer the galaxy, they would join it. And in that joining, something remarkable would be created, a future where species could overcome their differences and work together, where the lessons of the past could prevent the mistakes of the present, where the darkness of history could be transformed into light. The story of humanity and the coalition had only just begun,